Yes, I like PC gaming. What gave it away? And as a true consumerist RGB goblin, I spend a non-insignificant portion of my time watching tech content, and more specifically, content that focuses on computer graphics. I've had a long-standing fascination with how it was that my bootleg Russian-made NES ripoff could render such detailed and smooth representations of shirtless muscle men committing war crimes. And nowadays the fascination is the same, just the toys have gotten more expensive. So since I lurk in these channels from time to time, I've noticed that a lot, and I mean a lot of people are bashing ray tracing. Many of them think it makes no difference, or that it even makes things worse, while costing an arm and a leg to run properly. A recent example of this is the launch of Doom: The Dark Ages, which required an RTX card at minimum to run, leaving people who had older but faster cards disappointed, and forced to play the best shooter of all time for the rest of their days. How terrible. This left many people angry, as the same GPU they used to run Doom Eternal at 200 FPS could barely manage 60 in the new game without getting it to look like absolute trash. In which case, what's the point of ray tracing to begin with? A similar line of argument was also used when criticizing DLSS. Many people think that the extra performance it brings to the table is really just more leeway for the developers not to optimize their games properly, instead of extending the lifespan of their GPUs like it was intended. To the naked eye, these complaints about advancement in computer graphics may appear like boomers yelling at clouds, and that's what I thought of them for the longest time. Silly normie. Of course new games are harder to run than old ones. Liberal owned. As hard as it is to admit that I spent a significant amount of time arguing in YouTube comments, after conversing with these people for some amount of time, exclusively in a civil manner of course, I think I've come to understand what it is exactly that are angry at. And I, as a condescending content creator who knows what people think better than they do, am here to tell you that all of them are absolutely right. But in a wrong way. And I'm gonna tell you exactly why. Also, a lot of people liked my last video for some reason, so I need to restore some balance here. I am a dumbass and everything I'm about to say should be taken with a grain of salt. Unless I'm correct, in which case, I told you so, dumbass. Ray tracing is a computer graphics technique that simulates how light behaves in real time. A ray is cast from the camera in a per pixel basis onto a simplified version of the environment to calculate how it bounces off of different materials, how it interacts with shadows and other rays, with the aim of creating a more realistic dynamic lighting. To see what it brings to the table, let's use an example I shamelessly stole from Digital Foundry. Hot lighting not look flat, hot lighting look flat. Much like my bank account balance after looking at these prices of these GPUs. $700 for a last-gen mid-range GPU. Thank you, Nvidia. Can you also whip my ass as I check out, please? This kind of lighting fidelity could in theory be achieved in a traditional way, i.e. pre-calculated by the developers and then baked into the game. But the problem is that this would cost way too much storage. According to the developers of Assassin's Creed Shadows, if all lighting for that game was pre-calculated, it would take around 2 terabytes of data and around 2 years of time to put it into the game. So if you think games are already too big or expensive, then you haven't seen shit. Think of it this way. A single hour of lossless gameplay capture using something like Apple ProRes is about 200 gigabytes. That's for 1 hour of content. However, actually running that 1 hour of gameplay on your PC only costs you the size of the game and the processing power, which is a whole lot more than what is required to play a video. Something similar is happening here. Effectively, developers are saving storage and dev time by offloading more real-time processing to the end consumer. In theory, there is nothing inherently wrong about this. This jump was bound to happen someday, and is similar to the jump from fake 3D graphics with pre-calculated but static environments to real 3D, which at first looked and ran terribly. If you try to mitigate the static quality of these environments, you'd have to rebake that background a lot of times to account for every single way the player could interact with it. But with modern games, the calculations of those interactions happen in real time. It's only fair that lighting in games would undergo a similar progression, first with traditional dynamic lighting and then with full-on ray tracing. This will allow even smaller developers to achieve a realistic lighting and allow bigger ones to put out games faster, cheaper, and make them smaller in size. Just one problem though. To illustrate what's wrong with what I just said, let me tell you a bit about GM, the car company, not professional wood pushers. In the 70s and 80s, GM was faced with a challenge that sooner or later descends upon us all, an Asian doing it better, or more specifically two Asians, Toyota and Honda, sandwiching the American company between them and not in a sexy way. So as one does, GM invented about $45 billion in the 80s as a push towards automation, which by the early 90s resulted in over 200,000 people to lose their jobs. Their car prices stayed the same, but worry not, simple peasant, for the shareholders and executives were doing just fine. This kind of story happens again and again in all kinds of industries, and I just told you that in case you think this problem is exclusive to gaming or that it's just DEI hires that are being fired. Technology takes roots, people shoulder the failures of upper management, people blame technology. The same thing is happening to Amazon warehouse workers, to the textile industry in the 90s, to movie production in the early 2000s, and more recently with the advent of LLMs. The potential of all of these incredible pieces of tech is being siphoned not towards making the lives of the workers better, not even improving the cost of services to the consumers. It's being used to improve the bottom lines. And speaking of bottom lines, one cannot help but mention the most bottom of all of the lines. Who the fuck writes this script? Microsoft's revenue for these past 12 months has been the highest ever, only compared to the year before, which was also the highest ever. So based on this, we can expect that their workforce grew. They cut 9,000 jobs, of which about 2,000 were from Xbox alone. Same goes for EA and WB Games, which have also laid off hundreds of employees, and all they have to show for it are ballooning game prices, inflated development cycles, and the satanic rituals I'm sure Phil Spencer does every time you buy a new copy of the Oblivion remake. In that case, where is the extra efficiency that stuff like ray tracing generates for these corporations? That's a rhetorical question, because we all know. The people who spend their time complaining about these technologies also know. That's why I said they are right, but in a wrong way. You see, technology is neutral. On its own, it's neither good or bad. The problem is how it's used. Or more specifically, who decides how it's used. The same substance that was used to protect crops after harvest was also used as Grok's wet dream. The same technology and resources that could be used to further spread democracy can also be used to send reptiles to space. This doesn't mean that rockets are bad, of course. It just means that some people are better fit to decide what they should be used for. And that's exactly what people are mad about. If the developers themselves decided on how to use this new technology, they would use it to get more free time or make games faster or make them cheaper. They would definitely not use it to fire 2,000 people and pay this guy $10 million a year. This problem has become so abhorrent, in fact, that in a recent Digital Foundry podcast, John Linneman, one of the co-hosts, had this to say.
The world of capitalism has become even worse than ever.
Now you should understand, Digital Foundry are a bunch of tech nerds. A lovable bunch, I might add, but it's definitely not the place I'd go for radical rhetoric like this. Just like many tech nerds, they criticize games, companies and other products, but of course you'd never hear them look at things through such a wide scope. That sentence right there was so jarring that it immediately prompted me to start writing this video. Because when tech reviewers go from criticizing the Switch 2 screen or something to criticizing capitalism, you know things have gone horribly wrong. Or horribly right. So instead of ray tracing or even advancements like DLSS, what is it that we should be hating instead? Should you perhaps hate Microsoft or maybe Nvidia? Yes, of course you should. However, if people are good at one thing, they are good at hating. And I don't think that hatred towards individual companies is enough. If you went through the same meat grinder as these higher-ups went through in their careers, you'd eventually also have your soul replaced with the following directive. Shareholder is God, make more money. So honestly, I don't think we're in a moral position to blame the meat for getting ground up like that. What we should blame instead is perhaps the fact that the meat grinder exists in the first place. Thanks for watching, and good night.